Hi chess friends, this is King's Executor giving you a very interesting game fitting to our repertoire between Garry Kasparov and Evgeny Bareev from 2001 from the World Cup of Rapid Chess, Group A, Round 1. Bareev is a very strong grandmaster. Back then he had 2709 ELO rating, and Kasparov, of course, with his record-breaking ELO rating back then, which Magnus Carlsen broke with the Tattersall tournament this year. He had an ELO of 2849. Kasparov opened with e4, and now we see again the Korchnoi gambit reached via a different move order. Instead of c5, knight f6 was the move from the last video clip with Korchnoi playing the Korchnoi gambit. c5 and knight gf3 here, knight f6 and e5 now, kicking that knight, and c3, knight c6 and bishop d3. Now in 2001, of course, every grandmaster knows the Korchnoi gambit, queen b6 and castles, and in the Korchnoi game we saw what happened when black took this pawn and here we have the first move, gaining time on the queen, and then queen a4 was the game continuation of Korchnoi and Udovcic. But here after castles, Bareev didn't take on d4 in order not to give white the developing tempi. Instead, Bareev tries an Anti-Korchnoi-Gambit-System with g6. Of course, you see that this bishop is always free to drop back, and it's bearing down that diagonal, so g6 is trying to let that bishop bite on granite, as Fischer would describe it. Now Kasparov takes that c5 pawn in order to get his pieces out differently, and if white takes this bishop here, black takes this knight here, sorry, then you see that immediately white is gaining a very strong initiative here down the queen side. So instead, Bareev took off that very valuable bishop. Well, normally, if you look at this central pawn, that makes this bishop weaker. But black is going to castle short. Castling long here would be probably very risky. Firstly, because that bishop is gaining time on the queen. Secondly, we would have c4 with the rook or without as a preparation and opening up the queen side very fast. So this is why in this position black is going to castle short. That makes this bishop very valuable because it can attack the dark squares on the king side, which is the theme of this game. Well, the opening theme. Bishop g7, bishop f4, castles, and queen d2. Preparing, as we all can see, bishop to h6. Bishop d7 here, rook fe1. Of course, we don't want to allow this pawn to be taken after the bishop moves, so that pawn is defended beforehand, and now a5 from Bareev. Well, I repeat, this is a rapid game, and this is why firstly I will not go through too much detail. I will try to cut the variations short because there is a very complex variety of tactics later on. I will keep it to a minimum. I will try it. Bishop h6 now. a4, gaining time on the knight. Takes on g7. King retakes and knight to d4. Well, Bareev really did a very interesting try here. In comparison to the other game we saw on that Korchnoi Gambit, White didn't win that much time on the black pieces, and well, therefore White controls the d4 square here with his pieces. His e5 pawn looks weak, but in fact it's not easy to attack. Any f6 move would incredibly weaken the dark squares. So it's not easy to attack that pawn. Knight a5 here, heading to c4, and this pawn is trying to keep that knight there. Well, what if black tried to take on d4 here? Well, there are two ways to answer that. If the knight recaptures, then black could try to find a counterplay with rook fc8. This is my analyzed variations. Rook e3, trying to attack black now. a3, b3, and queen d8. A very interesting move. And after rook h3, attacking the weak spot, queen h8. This might look very ugly, but the next move is simply king goes back, and then the queen is attacking that pawn, and someday maybe the rook can come here, back here, or yeah, can come here and play f6 afterwards, and then you would have the queen on the dark squares here. It's defending and attacking, so you'll never know. Another aspect of queen h8 would be that after queen h6 check, you see that the queen can exchange off, or at least kick the queen back, still defend the soft spot, and then black could try to find counterplay on the c-file, and this pawn is here backwarded, and if any time that pawn is provoked to c4, well, you see that not only maybe a pawn would drop from the white side, but after exchanging here, that bishop would get a nice diagonal down here. Back to the game position, if black would have taken here, there would of course be the other option of pawn takes. Well, then I would think black could try to exchange queens, also liberating this pawn. If queen f4, then h6 could be a move, trying to control the dark squares a little bit more and give the king space here. After a check, the king could go to h7, and a move like h4 could be answered by the interesting bishop e8, giving that bad bishop a good defensive job. And h5 could be answered by rook g8. And now you see Black could gain even counterplay on the king side if white isn't careful. If white would take here, the rook can take this, and if queen e7, queen b5, attacking b2, connecting with the bishop, and maybe getting back here, trying to exchange again a pair, or the queens here. So this is my analysis on knight takes knight from the black side, and I think that was worth consideration, what Bareev surely did, but he tried to get his knight active on c4. But I think having dark squared weaknesses on the king side, black needs to exchange off pieces and try to find counterplay and or try to exchange the queens before he gets troubled on the queen side. I think it's not easy at all for black to break through on the queen side, so that means that keeping the knight on c4 would result probably in a lack of counterplay. Rook a b8 in order to, after knight c4, liberating the queen, so that pawn is still defended then. Queen c4 and queen, knight c4 and queen f4. And now queen d8 in this position. Well, was my queen d8 move nicer than his? You can decide. h4, h6, queen g3, and queen e7. Well, I think from this position on, it's way easier playing white than black. This bishop cannot find a good diagonal, and black, now you can see that black is really lacking counterplay. That knight is not really doing much. It looks at the e5 pawn, but I'm not sure that it helps black. Meanwhile, white can maneuver his knights to attack the king, and attacking is easier than defending, so again I would have captured in this position on d4 with the knight probably, but it's of course not easy. So white to move, knight e2, the rerouting of the knights begin. King h7 to get the rook to the g file and the king off the queen file. Knight f4. White's position starts to look very nice from move to move, nicer from move to move, and rook g8 here. Well, this is a good example of how to attack the black king, and it's not in the caveman style, but rather in a very tactically aware style. Rook e2 was Kasparov's move, and after rook a f8, rook b e1. Why doubling rooks on the e-file? Well, firstly, let's go on. Firstly, the rook goes back to c8, kinda searching or waiting for white to come. But now, knight h2 was Kasparov's interesting move, trying to sink that knight into the f6 square. So let's drop back to in this position when rook e2 was played. Why not knight h2 immediately? Well, then the c4 knight shows its value. It could have gained time on the rook and then time on the queen. So that wouldn't be at all in white's favor. So rather attacking immediately, white did a good job in preventing that knight to come to d2. So sorry, my mouse. Sorry. Okay, that pawn is defended, that pawn is defended, and that square is defended. Now the knights can move without tears, and knight h2, g5 was the move. Well, let's look at one variation. What if queen d3 check? This would look nice, and black has a good response here, actually, with king h8, the only good move. And after knight h5, black could open up lines against the king. You see h4 to h3 is trying to open up white's position, and if you then would play g3, then this bishop would become very strong on this light squares, and it also can come to b5, and afterwards, after bishop to b5, you can play, for example, knight to a3, attacking the queen and skewering it to the rook. So there would be, I guess, too much counterplay for black here, and the engines say that queen h3 would be the best move in order to prevent h3 from black. So this is why in this position Kasparov played the better move, the best move. Knight h5, this pawn was taken, and now queen h3. So the difference is that this king is still on a checking square. In the other line, white would have helped the king to go to a safer square, where the knight cannot check it anymore. And now, of course, this rook would be hanging. So rook g5, and knight f6 check. Well, the engines say that knight g4 is possible, then rook takes, check, king g6, f4, queen c5 check, gaining time, and rook takes e5, very interesting. And after pawn takes, knight takes, rook takes, king takes, and check, and rook rook to f1 here is of course very strong for white winning. f5 maybe to stop would be answered by the marvelous rook f takes f5, and if that rook would be taken, then check. This is devastating. So knight g4 was a move, but this is again a rapid game, so Kasparov decided for the safer move, the easier one, with check, king g7, and f4, protecting the pawn with the pawn, so trying to get out of any sacrificial tactics. But again, knight to g4 was stronger, and this doesn't work because of queen takes. So knight to g4 would have been stronger. Instead, f4 was the move. We can understand that move, of course. It looks very strong. Rook g8, rook g6, and now the knight comes in. Rook h6, trying to kick the knight. So check to block, and after king f8, knight g to f6, and bishop c6, trying to gain counterplay against white's king. This is what grandmasters do. They don't want to die only with defending. They try to find counterplay, whatever it might cost. In this case, it costs not only the h-pawn, but a vicious attack. h3, b3, and knight b2. Well, in a sense, that knight is maybe trying to come to d3. But Kasparov thinks that king h2 is has priority to get out of any checks. Queen c5 anyway, and rook e3 to cover the pawn, and of course knight d3. But in this position the engines suggest f5, which is of course a move, in my opinion, which was of course in Kasparov's consideration, because this is a very clear-cut move. If black would have taken that, then e6 is killing. And if you don't want to lose pawns, or let's say black would take here, then you see, of course, this is devastating. And the simple threat is that after, let's give white a free move here, check and check. This is of course mating. This is mate. So f5 would have been stronger. The better move instead of takes would be rook g5, cutting that queen diagonal off, and then takes. And again, if you recapture, then this is really difficult. It's not a playable position anymore for black. Knight f4 is a very strong move, not only looking at e6, but after, let's say, bishop b5 attacking the rooks, then check, and if that knight has to is taken here, then we have this vicious check attacking the queen, and well, that's winning easily. So again, f5 was actually the winning move. Kasparov played safe. You never know in what time trouble the players were. And d4, Bareev's try again to attack this now weakened g2 spot. Rook g3, and well, this rook should have been taken. Then queen takes, and queen takes, trying to exchange queens here. But I guess Bareev was afraid of this check here. But the point is that both rooks are attacked. Let's say takes. Then we can take this, and this bishop is watching over checkmate. And now you see that is actually a draw with perpetual check. So Bareev should have taken the rook on g3. But it took on c3, which is now winning for white. That rook is taken, and now again the idea which we've seen beforehand, that knight sacrifice with gain of time, to get the queen involved, and now it's simply mate in 1. On king e8 we have knight g7 checkmate, and on g8 we have queen g7 checkmate. And this is the position where Kasparov got the point. So let's just recap the game very quickly without any side steps. We have again the Korchnoi Gambit, and in this case black doesn't take his offer. Instead he tries to play solidly, and in this case Kasparov takes on c5. He probes the knight, which takes the good bishop. Bishop g6, bishop f4, again lining up against the bishop. Beforehand we cover the pawn, a5, a4, and here is the point again where black should have taken on d4 in my opinion. Maybe Bareev was afraid of two strong pawns in the center, but they are not doing anything. In this closed position only the pieces do something, and this is why they should have been exchanged. Knight a5, rook to b1 protecting the pawn, queen d8. b3 would allow black to be in charge of the a file and give him counterplay. This is why we don't kick that knight prematurely. h4, this is what you can afford if the center is blocked. h3, and now the knight rerouting. Now the rook is on a very good file for black. Rook e2 to stop the knight from infiltrating. And now black is kind of waiting. And now this very nice knight move. g5 to stop white's fluid plan. Knight h5 takes, and this opens up the black semi-open files. Queen h3, the best move. Rook g5. Let's drop back. King h8 would have been the safer move, getting that king out of any checks. Rook g5, check. And in this position, of course, the king tries to flee, maybe through f8, f4, and now you see how the knights are all over black's kingside here. H8 trying to kick the knight, so check, and now simply the other knight goes to f6. Bishop c6 trying to counterattack. Queen takes h4, a3, b3, king h2, and this is the move which takes away white's advantage. f5, or even rook f1, even queen h3 preparing f5, but f5 straight away would have been the winning move. Rook e3 and d4, and this is actually giving black the opportunity to draw the game, but Bareev didn't take his chance and rather lost to this very, very strong check on d7. Probably a tactic which Bareev didn't see, maybe due to time trouble. This is a rapid game, and he was relying on his very nice pawn, and if rook c1, then knight d3, winning the game. But unfortunately, you see the weak dark squares here. Not only because of the exchange of the dark squared bishop, but that pawn on f7 is gone. So these tactics are very strong and winning. Okay, I hope you liked the game. I hope you saw that white, even in the Anti-Korchnoi-Gambit-System with the fianchetto dark squared bishop from black, had a good plan, had a very easy kingside attacking plan. And you should keep in mind to open up black's position with such pawn levers at the right moment. Please subscribe, comment and like if you did. Thanks.